Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Comic Living show number 221 for May 5th, 2025, which happens to be my birthday. So thank you to all of you who have reached out with birthday wishes. We are drinking Highland Park 12-year Viking Honor in an extremely fancy bottle. This is bottled at 43%. Like all Highland Park that I've had, this is outstanding. Although I did just put a little water in it, and it might have been a little too much, but it will have to do. So our topic tonight is beer and pretzels wargaming, and I am clipping Advanced Squad Leader, the antithesis of beer and pretzels wargaming. But that is going to continue to be the case for most of the rest of the year. So we'll talk about a variety of news type things. Tonight as well. I don't have a link to the Discord server handy, so if anybody would like to join the Ardwulf Discord community, please send me an email. There is an email in the ticker, which is up right now. So big shout outs to the patrons of Ardwulf Lair, without whose support and encouragement we would not be able to keep doing this, as well as to our official sponsor, Noble Knight Games, from whom we will hear a little bit later on. There are a whole bunch of ways to support the show in the video description, but if you haven't done it already, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed. So, any case, no scotch. Anyway, that's unfortunate for you, but I have scotch, so I am a happy man. It is excellent. So, anyway. What do we got here? Let's do the roll call before it rolls away. First, I have to pop the chat out, which is a precondition of the thing on the side of the screen working. And as you can see, I'm not incredibly well prepared this evening. So, let's say hello to Board Gaming Geezer Carl Fung. Carl, thanks for stopping by. Charles Latora, Chris Yap, Christopher Smith, Doe Wenard, Drew Detterer is here. Drew, thanks for stopping by. Danny Seckery, Dave Poirier, David Thompson is in the house. David, thanks for stopping by. Missed you at Buckeye Game Fest, unfortunately, but I'll catch up with you at Origins. David Zell, Ed Holtzman, Emily Starsmith, welcome to the show. Eric Selna, Gregory Rogan, Grunyard Rich, HUN644 New, the legend himself, fucko, was here. James Whitner, Jeff Anderson, Jeff Beeler, Jeff Edwards, Joe Hammond, John Mogg, John Stanley, Jonathan K., Jonathan Dyer, Lee Grant Manders, Mark McNair, Mark Dennehy, Marty Sample is here, Meandering Mike, Michael Karlowski, Mitchell Land is in the house, Neil Badgeek, Panzer Division Lair, Paul Dangle, Perfidious Albion, Philip Musket, Ray Musselman, Rob Johnson, Royce, Ryan Huard, Scott Bell, Stacking Limit is here, Stephen Rochelle, Todd Cox, Vince Ree, Wargame Ramble, William Bird, and Winterson. And I apologize to anybody that I have missed. And Joe Mentum, I didn't get you. So thanks everybody for stopping out this evening. So this is cool. And, I would say this probably counts, but I want to get into, what makes a game a good beer and pretzels game. But let's tackle some minor news items this evening. So, there is two pieces of RPG news, one of which is, I think, fairly big news, although it will probably go largely unnoticed. And that is that Lee Gold, the editor and publisher of the Alarums and Excursions zine, which has been going for almost as long as Dungeons and Dragons, has decided to retire that publication. That is it is a milestone in tabletop role-playing games, Alarums and Excursions. But the more topical news is that Monday, May 1st is May Day, the official celebration of Traveler, and accordingly there are a huge pile of bundles of Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition and older Traveler material up on Bundle of Holding. So go ahead and Google that. I did not prepare links to show it off, but if you are interested in Traveler now and don't mind a digital format, now would be a great time to get into it. In particular, you can grab Pirates of Drenax for something like $13, which is a huge 3-volume set. And if you buy like the larger package, you get more stuff for it. But there's a lot of campaign, even when what you're getting for $13. So let's see here. One of the things that inspired the topic here is, in fact, the SPI Quad Fest that occurred at Buckeye Game Fest. And for that matter, I think they did something similar. Well, they did like an SPI Fest at Historicon. And I'd love to know how that went. But yeah, I think at least all the quad games that I personally am familiar with are certainly candidates for being a good beer and pretzels war game. One does, however, have to worry about beer getting spilled on the components, so there is that. So, Island War. Dave was at BGF and got to play Island War, which is one of the ones I haven't played or owned or looked at all, and it was one that I was interested in doing, but I probably wasn't going to have time to do it anyway, let's face it, even had I been in attendance at Buckeye Game Fest, which did not occur. I guess I'll give you the whole story of the week. I did stop into Buckeye Game Fest on Wednesday evening on the way home from work, and I did manage to hand off the 2 quad games that were needed for Quad Fest that were supposed to have come from me. And David Thompson got to play his first quad at BGF. Fantastic. Glad to hear that you liked it. Okay, you and Geraldo Rivera, apparently. So that was, not exactly exciting, but I walked around and said hello, and I wasn't there longer than maybe half an hour. It was cooking on Wednesday night, which is early for Buckeye Game Fest. So, at a glance, from what I saw, things looked good, and if Brant would like to give us a full report on exactly how well it went, I would love to hear it, but that will probably be reserved for the Armchair Dragoons podcast. So, John MC, thanks for stopping by. The Quadfest shirts would have been cool, yeah. I certainly would agree with that. So I am aware of Cinco de Mayo, and in fact, I have been to Puebla, the state of Puebla, not the city. There is a Mexican state in Mexico that where they make a big deal out of Cinco de Mayo. A lot of stuff's regional down there, however. This was close to 20 years ago, so who knows what things left happen there. That's cool. Thanks. I appreciate that. I guess we'll catch up on that at Origins, among other things. So, well, this is true. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's not Jim's personal instance as far as I'm aware. But the quad implementations of SPI quads on Tabletop Simulator are quite good from what I've seen. And now, admittedly, most of that experience has come from watching Jim play them. So there's that. Pete Bartlett is here. Thanks, Pete, for stopping by. I have only once ever on my birthday taken that as an opportunity to go out and get buttered up on tequila, which did not happen. John, thank you so much for the support. All your support. It is much appreciated. And I haven't actually had the chance to respond to your email yet. So thanks, John, and thanks everybody else for stepping out tonight. So, funny story. A couple of months ago, when they announced it, I told my wife, there's this thing that's happening on May 2nd, a couple days before my birthday, and I would love to go to it. And, then shit happened, and I, as you can expect, I was not told that she had already purchased said tickets. So we're talking on last Wednesday, actually, when I got home, and she's like, so what do you want for your birthday? And I'm like, I told you what I want for my birthday. I want to go see John Anderson and the Band Geeks and play at the Cleveland Agora. And she's like, I'm like, well, it's just too late now. It's on Friday. And she's like, it's on Friday. Oh, I got you those tickets. She was planning on telling me on Saturday when there was a hubbub planned at my parents' place. So, fortunately, the tickets did materialize, and I got to go, and I got the spiffy t-shirt as well, with the tour. Hopefully you can see that. I can't tell if you can see that or not. With the tour dates on the back. The show was great. I had a fabulous time. My wife did not go with me because she does not care for that kind of music. Let me put it that way. So, Vicky, thanks for stopping by, and thanks for the birthday wishes as well. The Berg Puebla is in Battles with the Gringos, which I have now, actually. So I actually should probably try and play that, to be completely honest. So that was awesome. And then we had a surprise birthday party on Saturday, which was not a surprise. But it was nice. Everybody was there. You know, the whole family was there, and it was nice. So that was all cool. So this is not, Yes is still touring, but this is John Anderson of the Band Geeks. So they played a lot of Yes material, and they played a little bit of their own material, but they played mostly Yes material. This is awesome, but I did not have that chance. And it was my position that this was going to be the closest I could come to seeing Yes in concert. And I have seen the Band Geeks play Yes material on their YouTube channel, and they are awesome. So I was like, and then they went on tour last year with John Anderson, the former lead singer of Yes. And unfortunately, they came nowhere close to Northeast Ohio. I think the closest they came was Chicago, and I believe I did think about it for a minute to go, and that it did not actually end up happening. Because A, Chicago, and B, something else was going on at the time. It was like the week before or the week after some convention or some other big project, and I just didn't get to do it. So it would have been amazing to see him in 1979 or in the 80s, for that matter, when they had their only number one hit or only big hit. I'm not even sure it was number one. So I have listened. Oh boy. Wow. Okay. So this would be like I think the ultimate time to have gone to see Yes in this sort of 3-album span right here of the Yes album to Fragile to Close to the Edge, I think, which is the classic Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe, and Squire lineup. I've heard this actually from a lot of folks that the tour was awesome and the album I can verify that the album is not that great, unfortunately. So I don't know who this is. So apparently not. John, it's called Taste Brand, and they have it. It is available from Amazon, I believe. So, this would be cool too. I do like Dream Theater as well. So as a Yes fan, you can probably that shouldn't be exceptionally shocking. I was certainly not the only person in the venue wearing a Yes t-shirt, but there were, I would wager there are a considerably smaller number of people in the building with a Yes tattoo. So there's that. What's his name? Damn it. Richie Castellano, who is currently playing with Blue Oyster Cult, is doing bass on this tour. The Band Geeks are basically his band. So, very nice. BSO Games. Not Billy Squire, Chris Squire, the talented one. I've listened to John Evangelis too. I don't know how you pronounce it. I always have always said Vangelis. See, this sounds completely reasonable to me. So, Genesis, like early Genesis though, or like late period or mid period Genesis? Because I friggin' hate late Genesis. Middle Genesis has some good stuff. Early Genesis is the Genesis with Pete. I'm giving you a rough approximation of the Genesis chronology here. Early Genesis to me is the Genesis with Peter Gabriel, and I do think they were better with Peter Gabriel than without. But the first 2 or 3, maybe even 4 albums after Peter Gabriel left were still really good, and have a considerable amount of cool stuff on it. I will also let you know that John Anderson can still sing very well indeed. So, and I've got some of the solo stuff as well. So I was trying to figure out a way to work this into the intro of the show, this lyric actually, without getting sued, and I haven't come up with anything yet. Yeah, I don't listen to the radio. Why would I listen to the radio? It is, let's let somebody else pick the music. That's can't like one of the three companies that owns every radio station in America. Let them pick the music that I'm listening to. I don't think so. And bombard me with what is it? 40% of the time you're on commercials. So Phil's not in great shape, unfortunately, and I'm not sure if he has a condition or if it's just body wear and tear. It's possible. Um, Mike Reed goes into The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which is, of course, the big Genesis concept album. I think possibly the last album that Peter Gabriel was with them. It is not my favorite Genesis album. My favorite Genesis album is Selling England by the Pound. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, they're all owned by the same couple of companies. They all play exactly the same song rotations where you can't even tell what channel, what station you're on anymore. So no thanks. I like Spotify for this purpose. Spotify has its issues, but I like Spotify. So, and this fine bottle of whiskey, by the way, was also a birthday gift for my brother, who works in the booze business, and who scandalously infrequently buys me booze for these occasions. I like Highland Park a lot anyway, and the bottle's really cool. I may do something. I don't know what I could do with the bottle after I've finished guzzling it down, but I will maybe give it a shot. I would rather listen to the stuff that I feel like listening to at that particular moment than a random selection of stuff on the radio. And if I do want to listen to, hey, I just want to listen to, some fresh stuff that I haven't heard before, Spotify can do that too. So MTV hasn't been MTV music television for how long now, right? Their tenure as not music television was a lot longer. I like, the same thing with Spot. I'm not sure if this has changed or not, but when I investigated satellite radio, it was just like a bunch of preset stations where you could listen to. There were like a couple of individual artist stations that would be like the Beatles or maybe Led Zeppelin or Elvis or something like that. And then you'd have like a couple different classic rock stations and a couple different of this and a couple different of that. I didn't know that. I don't know that was a good fit for me. So this is not the worst idea I've heard. Is Tidal the one that that uses a lossless format? Because that's possible. I don't listen to it even in the car. I got the phone just jacks into the car, so all I need to do is put up I set up a playlist and play the playlist, and that's it, or podcasts or whatever. So I think with our Subaru we had a trial, Alistair, of one of the satellite radio services as well, and I think I fooled around with it a bit. But that was it. It was like I like Spotify. I like Spotify better even at the time, and at the time I wasn't paying for it, which means there's ads. But it's still a relatively small percentage of the amount of time spent listening to ads as compared to commercial radio. So, all right. So, and this is entirely possible that it is now. I just didn't know. It really was not that great at the time. Everybody Albion remembers the episode of WKRP when they were looking at the radio stations. Yeah, I suppose so. I like some of the Huey Lewis stuff. I'm not a huge fan. So, all right. So, without further ado, wow. Okay. Dan Webb saw the Rolling Stones at the LA Coliseum in 1981, and the crowd booed Prince, who was opening for the Rolling Stones, off the stage. That's fairly interesting. So, all right. So, and this is very plausible too, but I don't generally. I only on special occasions. All right. This is an okay song. It's a bit of a novelty, but Historical miniatures games. Yeah, so that's actually an interesting point that Stacking Limit has made. So let me get the actual discussion started for the topic. What makes a game a good beer and pretzels game? Now, when I think of beer and pretzels games, again, this is not my like real Bailiwick, so bear that in mind. When I think of beer and pretzels, I tend to think of SCS because that was kind of designed like that's what Dean said. In Iggy Pop was a really interesting artist, to say the least. I like some of Iggy Pop's stuff, actually. But we can't neglect the Scotch either. So I think it's fairly obvious that a beer and pretzels game needs to be relatively simple, not necessarily extremely simple, and relatively short. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's short by the standards of like other non-wargame board games, right? I'll have to look at this, Dave. Thanks for the tip on this. Is this like a college? Is this like University of Akron or something like that? I remember this. I do remember Iggy Pop showing up. Yeah. So Carl, of course, is deeply involved in SCS and Dean's Legacy and all that stuff. Incidentally, I've got this huge moving box. It's not even like a file box. It's a box that somebody got. It might even have been me from the butcher shop or grocery store that they worked at that held chicken, and they're really sturdy boxes. So I still have several of them, and one of them had just had like tons and tons of old files that I have moved at least 3 times without looking at any of them. I started picking through that today, looking for old RPG characters, and was somewhat surprised and delighted to find that I had 2 of the old, at least, maybe there's more in there, because I have gone through like a 10th of it total. 2 of the old packs from the Gamers, where they would send out the annual, a little half counter sheet with errata counters and stuff. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I didn't even remember that I had any of these. But they were mine. I didn't get them in an auction or anything. They had my address on them, so that was that. Let me clarify. They had my parents' address on them. It was that long ago. So I would generally agree with that. And somebody mentioned Ogre, which did start out as one of the micro games for metagaming. That is definitely Car Wars 2, maybe, but you could also like get into Car Wars very seriously. So, British Albion says that he thinks that most of the Avalon Hill games were designed as beer and pretzels in spirit. I think that is true, maybe through the 60s. And I think it became less, maybe the 70s, but I think it became less true in the 80s. They started to ramp up complexity and things like that. But I think if you like look at the entire list of things that Avalon Hill put out, a lot of them are very friendly, easy to play games. Good call. Commands and Colors. Don't get too serious about the history and just sit there and have fun playing cards and moving blocks around. And of course, I do agree with Wargame Ramble on this, that the really big, well, at least Day of Days, which is the only like big SCS game that I've tried to play. Day of Days is not beer and pretzels just because of the sheer mass of the thing. There is a huge amount of stuff to push around in that game. Could it be argued that most Euros fit? Well, we're talking today here about Wargames specifically, but I mean, I am, without investigating at all, I'm positive that many Euros do in fact fit this category. And Melee and Wizard, which if you've got the new Fantasy Trip, you also have Melee and Wizard, not just as part of the whole thing, but like there's like a new versions of the original Melee and the original Wizard in that box, which you can buy individually too. Stacking Limit just sold $2,000 worth of games and RPGs to Noble Knight. I hope that you use that code. Jeff Beeler asks if a beer and pretzels game, does it have to be short duration? I don't think so. I think 4 to 5 hours, I think, would be fine. And for like non-wargamers, and even some wargamers, that sounds like a long time, right? When you're used to your game taking somewhere between 45 and maybe 90 minutes. A 5-hour game seems like a huge undertaking. Well, I don't mind I mean, I don't object to this as an idea, but it does take Day of Days in particular out of the beer and pretzels realm, in my opinion. I don't know how true that is of the other large BCS games. So we'd be talking about It Never Snows on Market Garden and the SCS North Africa. North Africa in particular might still be pretty fast playing, to be honest. I mean, the unit density is not very high. There's a lot of map, but it's not as though you've got like 1 million pieces to move. So this is a good point. I guess you can't outlast the beer and pretzels. So well, so there just for so it is plausible that I have not played very many of these Euros, but almost everything I've got that you could call a Euro, which is not that many things, is relatively high on the complexity scale. At least, I would say that. All right, what games do I have that I would consider Euros? Lords of Waterdeep, I think, is. I mean, it falls in the time range, but might be just a little too complicated for beer and pretzels, but barely, if that. Rash of Ashardalon, one of the other D&D board games, I would say is definitely beer and pretzels. It's basically Risk with dragons, which is fine, actually. And I played it and I enjoyed it. I didn't like run out and buy it, but then again, it took me several years to get a copy of Lords of Waterdeep too. So, we had, let's see, Panzer Battles is also, is that what it was called? Panzer Battles, the Cheer River stuff. That I think was 2 maps, as I recall. And I played a few turns of it, but I don't have a sense of how long the entire thing would take to play. I guess as long as the rules themselves are simple enough, and even Day of Days does have smaller scenarios, which is something that Dean and the gamers were generally very good about. You know, you can just play a scenario. So that is possible. All right, so Steve Rochelle has SCS North Africa right on the table right now, and even with the low counter density, the supply system, in his opinion, takes it out of beer and pretzels, which is fine, right? But even like, I'm not sure you could play the entire campaign of the Mighty Endeavor in 4 or 5 hours, to be honest. But that's one I would consider. Bastogne, however, you absolutely can, and I've played that too. So, hey, everybody, thumbs up. Yeah. It Never Snows is pretty straightforward. Day of Days has a relatively high amount of game-specific rules by the standards of SCS games. I think this is probably true of a lot. Oh, yeah, actually, this is a good call. So Will GM for Food says that some of his first war games were Beer and Pretzels, Ogre, Battle for Moscow, and Car Wars. All 3 of which I think really do count as war games, even though 2 of them are science fiction-y or post-apocalypse or whatever. If I haven't said, I'm clipping the British, by the way. But I think this is probably true of a lot of people in gaming, that they started out with games that today they themselves would consider Beer and Pretzels games. My first game, which I've talked about this before, or set of games, I should say, was Paratroop from S&T. I think it's issue 79, something like that. And that's actually got 3 small games about paratroopers in it. All of which I would consider Beer and Pretzels. And for that matter, I think a lot of the SPI magazine games of the era could be considered Beer and Pretzels. I feel a little less comfortable saying that about modern magazine games. even like S&T and World at War magazine games, I think they are a little more complicated and probably take a little longer to play. But that is a feeling that I have, and not necessarily like a definitive statement, right? Mike Reed mentions the Columbia block games. We talked about that a fair bit last night when we had James, who works with Columbia Games, out there. I got to tell you, so in a literal sense, I prefer not to consume adult beverages with my gaming. I have done so in the past and not had great results. So we borked a D&D campaign because we all got drunk and the game master gave everybody a sun sword. I'm not even making that up. You get a sun sword, and you get a sun sword, and you get a sun sword. Everybody had sun swords, and it broke the campaign. All right, so Perfidious Albion says, I assume we're talking about DAC or DAC 2 here. I mean, again, classic gamers titles will tend to have an excellent scenario selection. But I see what you mean about the kind of the structure of that campaign, I think. So you could do it that way. You're probably not doing the entire 5 maps that way, though. Will GM for Food says that coin is Euro adjacent at least. I would... Tonight's topic is not what is a Euro. So I don't really want to get into this. I think that there are some interesting parallels you can draw. Some interesting analysis to be done there with coins specifically, and maybe games that are somewhat similar to coin, as far as where they are borrowing their mechanics from. But I think it is not possible to construct airtight definitions of either Euros or war games depending entirely on the mechanics. There are some very heavy Euros. I am aware of this. I've got Lords of Waterdeep. I've got Lords of Baseball, no relation, which doesn't appear to be particularly heavy. I do have Europa Universalis, The Price of Power, which I actually does use some Euro mechanics, but I would consider it a war game too, the way it plays. Eclipse I have, that is squarely a Euro. I have at least one more, maybe 2 more. And that's pretty much my entire Euro selection, I suppose. Circus Maximus, yeah, good call. A lot of folks. That was a perennial convention favorite, and actually, I saw it being played on a giant 3D arena with miniatures. And they were actually using Circus Maximus at Origins last year. Junta is another interesting one, originally from West End Games. It's come out from several different publishers at this point. It's in its something edition. It's been through at least 4 editions, maybe more. I have never played Junta. I would actually like to, or Angola for that matter. I have been told by people who I have gamed with that I would probably like both of those games. Not necessarily the same people. Siege of Minas Tirith. Yeah, this is a very obscure title nowadays. So I am remembering correctly that Panzer Battles was the Cheer River SCS game, and it was 2 maps. Was 1830 the one that Avalon Hill did? Because I played that. Now, on the other hand, if you're playing it with like a bunch of finance people, that might be unfun. I have played, I think, 18xx games 2 or 3 times total, and I have enjoyed them every time, and I have at least one, just to have like one, but I have not played one of those games in a long time. And there you go, Mark McNair painted Wrath of Ashardalon. I don't know if that's how you're supposed to pronounce it or not, and I don't particularly care. So, Drew used to play classic Civilization over Country Kitchen over bottomless cups of coffee, fries, and cinnamon rolls. I would agree with this. Yeah, it does take a long time to play Civilization, at least the classic version. I cannot speak to any of the more recent revivals of Civilization. And when we say Civilization here, I think we're all on the same page where we're talking about the Francis Tresham designed game Civilization that came out from Discovery Games or Ariel or somebody like that, and then came out again from Avalon Hill. That's the one I still have, actually, and I think it is a good game, but it does take an awful long time to play. Country Kitchen, man, wow. I haven't thought of that for a long time. We used to have those up here, though. Let's see. Some tactical games, says Will GM for Food. ATS, World War 85 may qualify if the scenarios... So even ASL could potentially qualify if the scenarios are small enough. I think starter kit's a better fit, but, you know, if you are like one of those ASL people who just know the rules, I guess you could just play an easy scenario and beer and pretzels it, right? I mean, the beer and pretzels approach is, I think, at least to some extent, exactly that, like approach. It's the attitude of the players. If they're just kind of chilling and knocking back a couple and having fun and laughing and all that, that sounds like a beer and pretzels thing to me. So, Vlad C., welcome back to the show. Some Greg Kostikian games fit the beer and pretzels type. Bug-Eyed Monsters, which I've never played, and The Creature That Ate Sheboygan, which I've also never played, but I probably ought to, but it actually goes for a decent amount of money. They're both fairly silly. Bug-Eyed Monsters was from West End, and of course, Creature That Ate Sheboygan was from SPI. I played this at Wrath of a Shardalon at Origins, and like I said, it's pretty much Risk with dragons. But, you know, I don't actually hate Risk. I think it's got some, like, game issues by modern design standards, but I still don't hate Risk. And I would probably play it if the opportunity came up and nothing else was on tap. It does imply a snack, and this is exactly what I'm talking about, Royce. It is a casual approach to the game, and the game itself has to kind of be compatible with that. I mean, nobody's playing Goss as a beer and pretzels game. I'm reasonably confident that even Joe Youst himself is not approaching Goss as a beer and pretzels game. So, House Divided. I had the chance to play the new version of A House Divided. It's still pretty early playtest at that point, back in November at ST Hist. And I have never played A House Divided previously. It's pretty slick and easy. I could see that this might fall into the category. We didn't get an entire game in, though. Oh, yeah. Somewhere around here. One of the things I'm trying to do is I've got a lot of like loose stuff. And a lot of it turns out, some of it was buried in that friggin' box of files. So I've also found my GURPS 3rd edition GM screen. I had no idea that was in there. I thought it was just gone and I sold it or something like that, along with a bunch of other GURPS books. Nope, it's in the files. But I also have like loose maps, a bunch like Traveler Spinward Marches map that was in several different products. For example, I've got like 4 or 5 of those. And of all that stuff, I even found Harn stuff in there. So I have places to put these things. But I'm really trying to get things organized here. So my Panzer Division Lair mentions Hitler's War, which was originally produced by Metagaming and then was later done by Avalon Hill. And if you take a look at this game on BGG, you'll see that it's like this very, very zoomed out World War II in Europe type of game. I've never played it. The only thing I know about it is from watching Callendale play it. And from what he says, it still takes about 8 hours to, was it like 20? I think it sounded, as I recall, I forget the actual number of hours, but it sounded, as I recall, a lot like it took longer to play than a game like that should. If you want a World War II game that works in an hour, there's 1 hour World War II that just came out from Worthington and has been warmly received. Or Europe in Turmoil? I forget what it's called. There's another one, or an earlier one from Worthington that I actually did a video on. I forget the exact title, but it did what it said on the tin too. It's like World War II in Europe in 2 hours, and it took almost exactly 2 hours and came down to the last turn. So I was pretty happy with that. Perfidious Albion talking about the ATS. For those who don't know, I believe he's referring to the Advanced Tobruk system from Critical Hit. Very component light scenarios compared to ASL, definitely beer and pretzels. I'm not sure how true that is now, because ATS has kind of evolved quite a bit, as far as I could tell. But it is kind of hard to tell, because their website is not great. This is true, too. So I would venture to say that tournaments are generally not beer and pretzels, even if the game itself is beer and pretzels compatible, right? Avalon Hill Gettysburg, I could totally see. One Third Reich. I like this, actually. That's actually very good. I could totally see B-17, too, because it's I don't know that it's that simple, but it's totally procedural, and once you kind of see how the procedure works, it's very easy to play. It's relatively fast, unless you're Stuka Joe and making a giant production out of it. And this does get played at conventions as like team games, and I've seen this done with the Hunters as well, where it's like, we got these 6 guys or whatever it is. We are a wolf pack, and we're hunting allied convoys or whatever, and that you could do that, I think, pretty well. I could totally sympathize with this. Now, I have driven in New York City, and San Francisco for that matter. New York was like higher pressure traffic, although I believe San Francisco traffic was actually busier. I think if you have people who have played Rebel Fury already, it's not very complicated. There is a bit of I wouldn't say learning curve. I would say it's different enough from a lot of traditional war games that a traditional wargamer like myself might be confused at first. But I think once you get over that, which doesn't take very long, I think Rebel Fury totally fits. Maybe not the giant 5-map scenario that Mark's got coming in Army of the Potomac, but everything in Rebel Fury, I think, totally works. So Mark McNair is talking about Flying Pigs games, except he says they have fiddly line of sight rules. A lot of games have fiddly line of sight is any game that features line of sight. Dollars to donuts, it's probably the most complicated thing in the game. Speaking of last night, why didn't anyone mention War Stories by Firelock Games? I didn't, because I didn't think of it. It's the real answer. But I don't really know very much about this. It sounds potentially intriguing. So Brant, you got the beer and pretzels thing down, right? Between East Front Tank Leader, or whatever that thing's called from Lock and Load, I think. There's like an East Front Tank Lead. That's not the name of it, damn it. Brant knows the things I'm talking about. But something like Brief Border Wars, yeah, that could totally be. Once your first game of it is probably, unless it's an extremely casual situation, the chances are your first game is not going to be that casual, because you're like trying to learn it and not look like an idiot, right? Twilight Imperium, definitely not beer and pretzels. It takes 2 hours just to set the thing up. And I like Twilight Imperium. Snake Limit says the coin is not Euro adjacent. Euro games are very specific and usually have a theme bolted on that makes, I think this is certainly a definition of Euros that I am not sure is still as valid as it used to be. Let me put it that way. Blind Swords. Blind Swords, my opinion of the Blind Swords games is quite high. I've got most of them. It is a solid system. I've never considered it a beer and pretzels type of game, but I could see how it could be played that way. I think I find that very believable. Christopher Smith says World at War magazine games are very good of late. Good job by Decision. Playing out writing campaigns in Europe, expansion games next weekend. That sounds great. I want to get the Italy game to the table, actually, and that might be the next war game I actually set up in there. Is the Italian one. This is true, and it always is going to help that somebody's not like coming in 100% ice cold, right? Oh, good Lord. I do. So I've seen people take this fairly seriously. One of the other things I found was in the files was the old newsletter from the gaming club I belonged to back in Lorain County in the 90s. 90s, yeah. And I remember they had Blood Bowl leagues from time to time, usually when there was a new edition of Blood Bowl out. And those things got ferociously competitive. So I don't know if, well, like I said, part of what makes a Beer and Pretzels game a Beer and Pretzels game is the casual approach. And Patty Rafesky says that all board gaming is Beer and Pretzels worthy. Potentially that's true. So Brant mentions the old Kung Fu fighting card game from Slugfest Games, which first is the first I'm hearing of it, was an awesome Beer and Pretzels game because you played better once drunk. There are games like that. I'm trying to think. One could make that claim about Apples to Apples or Cards Against Humanity or Pit. For that matter, but never buy a copy of Pit that doesn't have the bell, because the whole point of the game is the bell. GDW Soldier King. I'm trying to picture that in my head. When I think Soldier King, I think of Soldier Kings from Avalanche, actually, but you're talking about something different. It can also depend on game familiarity, right? In order for it to be that kind of casual experience, one needs to be reasonably familiar with the rules, where at least you're not looking much up, right? Chris George talks BattleTech, actually. I have not played BattleTech since the original BattleTech came out from FOSSA, whenever that was. It might be a vastly different game now. I do know that Barnes & Noble sells it. They have there's a starter kit, and then I don't know what the product line looks like, to be honest. I'm never particularly tempted by BattleTech. Because it does have miniatures, after all. Jeff Beeler lists off Kingmaker, Britannia, Maharaja, History of the World, and Soldier Kings. I think rules mastery matters. I think scenario size does too, because I don't think anybody's is approaching a huge monster all that casually, right? At first glance, I would say that it is. I would agree with Stacking Limit on this point, just because of the complexity level. But remember, you don't have to actually use it all. You could easily do ASL Starter Kit as Beer and Pretzels, for example. By the way, I do have the ASL Starter Kit magazine. I have now removed it from its crinkly packaging from Multi-Man and taken a look at it, and the scenarios look great. The articles look good. Haven't really done anything with it other than browse it. Haven't even read anything in it yet. I think Jeff Beeler has... I'm not sure this is a working definition, but I agree with the sentiment here. War games that you play for fun rather than to win is a Beer and Pretzels game. I play everything because I want to play it, right? Everything I play, I'm playing because I think it's cool, and I want to play that. Stephen Rochelle mentions Battle Masters. I do remember this. I'm reasonably sure I've never played it. Yeah, me too. I tend to make shitty decisions, well, after a certain amount of alcoholic beverage. Let me put it that way. Spheres of Influence. I'd be curious to have a look at this, but I am unfamiliar with it at this time. I can totally believe, which I've also not played, Wings of Glory or Sails of Glory, or I think there might be another one. Those, I would find that completely believable. Or unless people are getting it, like, super competitive about it. So... Oof, there is an awful lot of math to play for me to play Starfleet battles and consume alcohol at the same time. I gotta tell you, because The other thing is that my recent Starfleet Battles experience, here's how I play Starfleet Battles. It's 11 p.m., we're at Winterfest, and Lee says, hey, who wants to play Starfleet Battles? And 5 people are like, sure, I'll play. And by the time we're done, it's like 2 in the morning, and I'm totally exhausted, and I can't think straight. Yeah, we do not need to add, and sometimes there is alcohol involved with that, but the quality of my play will be poor. Let me put it that way. I've heard mixed things on Hitler's War. Some people do like it. Other people say it's not very good at all. I figure if you're going to take 15 or 20 hours to play it, I might as well play Third Reich. Really. Will GM for Food mentions Tide of Iron, which I've never played. But it has the FFG fiddly components issue where setup takes longer than some entire games. I can definitely vouch that is the case for Twilight Imperium. It takes a long time to set up. Phoenix Command, wow. Because it'll drive you to drink. Blood and Sand, there you go. Down in Flames. Yeah, so this is another one that gets played at conventions a lot, like in the evenings when everybody's big game is done for the day because everybody's mentally exhausted. I think this gets played at Consum Expo, for example. How backed up am I? Reasonably backed up. I am 10 minutes behind on the chat. So, all right. Coffee isn't conducive to maps. So in general, if I am drinking a beverage at a game table, I will keep a very close eye on my receptacle, and usually I'll put it on the floor, and I will prefer things with caps or lids of some kind rather than just an open top container. But sometimes you got what you got too, right? Mike Reed mentions Enemy in Sight, NASCAR stock racing game. I have no familiarity with that whatsoever. Enemy in Sight, I at least know what it is. I have not. I need a frame. That's the delay here. I now have a number of things that I need to frame. And although this sounds intriguing, don't tease us or anything, Mitch. Yeah, this is fair too. Games that ought to be good Beer and Pretzels games, but turned out not to be because they're probably a little too convoluted. I am not sure who designed Gunslinger, but I think you could probably make the same claim about the Avalon Hill version of Blackbeard too, and that was Richard Berg. So, Joe Okabayashi, thanks for stopping by. Tank versus Tank. Tank versus Tank's the game I was thinking of before. There's like an East Front version and a West Front version, and they're both like incredibly simple. And I've seen Brandt run them at many conventions at this point. That is totally the one that I'm talking about. Brandt says that 1 hour World War II is a significant flaw because he's not sure you can actually recreate the historical course of events within the rules. They added a house rule for special action shits, and it's more playable. Okay. Space Pigs. I'm not familiar with this either. Let's get to Dale Brady. Dale Brady, thanks so much for both the birthday wishes and the support. They are both greatly appreciated. The older we get, the crankier we get on our birthdays. I have never been as birthday cranky as I was on my 30th birthday. I was an asshole the entire day. So, good call. So GDW is 1940, 41, and 42. These are all three of these were part of GDW's Series 120, which was intended to be played, I think, with a maximum of 120 counters and in a maximum of 120 minutes, I think was the idea. And these were the 3 games that got re-released from Compass as World War II campaigns pretty recently with an Art Lupinacci graphical redesign. 1940, I'm pretty sure, is France. 1941 is Barbarossa, and 1942 is the Pacific. And trying to think who the design. I know of the 3, one was designed by Frank Chadwick, at least. One was designed by Mark Miller, and I forget who the third designer was. It could have also been Frank, but it might have been somebody else at GDW too. So I'm not totally sure. There we go. SPI's Paratroop Tri-Pack of mini war games. This was my very first war game back in something like 1980. Christopher Smith, thanks for stopping by. We'll catch you on the flip side. Dave Scott asks, is beer and pretzels a negative connotation? I do think some people treat it as such. I see it as entirely situational. I mean, there are going to be people who just don't like these kinds of games, but there are also, as we know, people that don't like Case Blue kinds of games, right? So games do not need to appeal to absolutely everybody. And that is fine. It is fine to have your preferences and my preferences, which are going to be different. So I have seen it used as a negative statement. I don't agree that it is. Tim Sales mentions Warfighter, but you're just drinking by yourself, which sounds like a not awesome idea. I am also not a big fan of Cards Against Humanity, to be fair, but I have played it. So, McKenna, thank you so much. It would be great to see you and everybody at Origins in just mere weeks. John Longshore says that there is, if I've heard this, I haven't heard this. I have looked this up on BGG, and it kind of looks cool, but it also goes for a decent amount of money that I'm not going to pay for a version of Risk. There was a Napoleonic version of Risk, like explicitly Napoleonic with Napoleon on the cover and all that. Okay, so Mike Reed clarifies that Soldier King was a house divided to clone, taken to multiplayer in a 7 Years War-like setting. That sounds interesting, actually. There you go. There you go. Yes. Soldier King versus Soldier Kings. I am aware of that, but I'm still getting them mixed up in my head. I have never played the Battlestar Galactica board game. I hear it's very good. Vincent Baker, who's the designer of kind of a lot of stuff, actually. Vincent Baker is the guy who I shouldn't say it that way. Was involved in the design. I'm not positive that he's the lone designer of the original Apocalypse World, as well as Dogs in the Vineyard, which I've played Apocalypse World too, as well as Dogs in the Vineyard, where you kind of play. They're not like called Mormons, but you're basically playing crusading Mormons in the Old West. It's an intriguing game. Let me put it that way. I have played the nuclear war card games. Does the Beer and Pretzels game need to have an easy setup, i.e. not a lot of units and counters? You can actually have a decent number of units and counters and still expedite the setup. Here's Brant's house rule for 1 hour World War II, by the way. Okay. This seems like an easy fix, though. I'm trying to be less behind. I am currently 8 minutes behind on the chat. Mandarin Mike says that Spheres of Influence is exceedingly pricey. The designer talked about a new edition and then disappears. I don't really know much about this game. Labatai, how's your hexadecimal, or your base 6 math, I should say, not hexadecimal. Hexadecimal is base 16 math. Brian Lindsay says that the moderate intake of herbal substances is preferable to serious drinking when gaming. I would prefer not to do either one. I'm not I don't make any pretensions about being an exceptionally amazing player. I figure that I can use all the handicap I can get, and if the other players at the table are drinking, then I think I'm going to stay sober. Oops. Speaking of that, you'd think I was drunk because I didn't have the lid off of it. All right. Mike Reed mentions Upfront. I've never played Upfront. That will change at some point. One of my local guys is a huge fan. So... Oh, I suppose this is true. If you do delete it, it might end up... It will... Once it hits StreamYard... So if you are watching and you make a comment, presumably that's probably on YouTube, okay? It will go to StreamYard, and then you might retract the comment on YouTube, and it will indeed disappear from YouTube. But if StreamYard already has it, it will still show up for me, because I see the comments through StreamYard, because then I can see if anybody's commenting from Twitch or whatever. And we have exactly one person watching from Twitch. Thank you, whoever you are. Titan. Ooh, again, Titan's another one that takes a little too long, but I think tonally, I think it does work for this. Birth of America series by Academy Games. I don't know about that. So I got to the super chat. Thank you, both of you, John Longshore and Dale Brady. Dogs in the Vineyard. Is that not what I said? Maybe I didn't. So I've seen this book. I remember seeing this book on a show. I've heard of it since then too. I remember seeing this Sandhurst Book of Wargames on a shelf at a local independent bookstore back in the mid to late 80s, something like that. And it was like this bundle of games. It looked interesting, but I never picked it up. Does War at Sea qualify? If Victory in the Pacific does, then War at Sea does as well. I hedge on Victory in the Pacific. I've never played War at Sea, but I have played Victory in the Pacific, which is a very good game. But I do feel like a lot of Avalon Hill games of the era, it takes kind of longer to play than I want it to. That's my only hesitation in saying that Victory in the Pacific is Beer and Pretzels compatible. I think it's true. I think it's very plausible. And then Armageddon War is another one that I could totally see. Oh, okay. I'm not sure I've noticed that. It certainly the Apocalypse World stuff or Apocalypse Engine or Powered by the Apocalypse has had a much bigger impact on the whole hobby than Dogs of the Vineyard did anyway. So I did not know that. And I still have Dogs in the Vineyard. I've played Dogs in the Vineyard and a campaign, no less. I was probably in about a dozen sessions, and it's an interesting game. I have seen at least one unboxing of By Swords and Bayonets, but they have not. I have not received a shipping notification yet. I'd be curious to know which one this was. Drew says one of the old micro games was once referred to as the ideal game to play whilst stoned. And folks, if you haven't hit the like button, thank you, Danny. Please do so. Oh yeah, Robert did cover the Sandhurst book, and there's other video on it as well, I believe. Perfidious Albion finds the Academy Games Conflict of Heroes a Beer and Pretzels design. Caveat. The only one of the series that I have played is the Guadalcanal one. So what I'm about to say about the artwork might not apply to the other games. I found the map difficult to read and very difficult to tell where the hexes were. The contrast was not high enough. That was my biggest problem with the game, which was otherwise good. Okay, well, Powered by the Apocalypse is doing tons of stuff. It's sort of this mechanical framework that's pretty adaptable. It, I think, has been adapted to other games with varying degrees of success. I think some of the Powered by the Apocalypse games are basically only good for one-shots, but there are exceptions to that. I think Blades in the Dark is one of those exceptions, for example. There's also Court of Blades. We'll get to Noble Knight. Actually, now might be a good time because I am trying to catch up on the chat, and I actually am kind of succeeding at catching up on the chat. So let us hear from our good friends at Noble Knight Games, the official sponsor of the Counterclipping Show.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more. Going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at. Complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world, just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
All right, big thanks to Noble Knight Games. They're excellent people, and I had something come in from them just last week or the week before. Napoleonic 20. Yeah, good call on this from Vlad C. So the Napoleonic 20 games came. I think that they might have done a couple Ancients ones too. Um, the this series came out from Victory Point Games, and then GMT was going to re-release a bunch of them. They did one box, which was 4 games with a mounted map, 2 mounted maps actually, double-sided mounted maps. I believe they're half-size maps. And for some reason that fell through, and then supposedly Decision was going to bring the Napoleonic 20 games back, and I have heard absolutely nothing about that pretty much since then. So, possibly. I was aware of the provenance of the term Perfidious Albion, by the way. Brent, I know you are a big fan of I think it's Iron Sworn, isn't it? Not Iron Sword. I have actually looked at this, and it is not to my taste. Let me put it that way. That this is not a statement that it is bad. It is a game I have glanced at. I believe you can download it for free, and which I have basically no interest in for a couple of different reasons. Eric's Table Napoleonic Battles. Eric, thanks for stopping by. Ace of Aces is another good one. Enemy in Sight has already been mentioned. I'm not sure anybody mentioned Naval War, but that would be another good one too. I believe that is a card game, from Avalon Hill. Ace of Aces is another one, though. I think that's a very good call. Old or new, it's all good. Okay. One World, packaged with Annihilator, was the micro game using rock, paper, scissors as the combat system. Well, there's a whole genre of games that a lot of the live action games, at least back in the day when this first became a thing, used rock, paper, scissors as its resolution mechanism. So, Iron Sworn, yeah. Like I said, I glanced at it, and mechanically it looks fine. I don't like it. It's not the kind of fantasy I'm into. So, this is an interesting point. I want to get to Jeff Anderson's question here too. Jonathan Dyer says he thinks some RPGs are a better fit for beer and pretzels than war games. How do we feel? I don't know. I think I see where you're coming from here, but at the same time, I do think that more. I'd really have to think harder about this, to be completely honest. From just like a table tone thing, I think that's where you're coming from on this. I think you're probably right. But in terms of like design intent, I think that's less clear. I think, and a lot of that is just because wargaming as a hobby is older than RPGs as a hobby, and a lot of the design effort in wargaming has been into new wargames, right? As opposed to expansions for some existing thing, which we've also seen in wargames, but I think wargames are a lot less reliant on that model than RPGs are. Yep, I remember Lost Worlds. In fact, in that estate thing that I picked up a few years ago, there was a stack probably that big of Lost Worlds books, and I traded them to somebody at work for something, I forget what, because I wasn't particularly into that. But there's nothing wrong with Lost Worlds or Ace of Aces. It's exactly the same basic idea. It's a booklet. You have a booklet. Your opponent has a booklet, which is probably a different booklet. And you pretty much find like what you're doing. You find your page and they find their page, and you compare the pages, and that determines what happens. Pocket Battles from Z-Man. I totally believe this. Abraxas MF, thanks for stopping by. Jumping over from Twitch to mention the Worthington / Old School Wargames Civil War series, and also Axis and Allies. And I would totally say that, and thank you for the birthday wishes. I would say that Axis and Allies definitely counts, as does Risk, for that matter. I'm not sure what we're talking about when we say Old School Wargames Civil War series. Are we talking about the Civil War Brigade Battle series? Because that I could see. That series is very easy to play. Very easy to play. Depends how serious you are about chess, I suppose. Who was it? So, as part of the Traveler celebration, usually this happens. Mark Miller was interviewed, and I think Mark became interested in games while he was in college, and then like maybe high school, I forget. And then like started, hanging out with the chess club, and then realized that, man, these people are like super laser focused. I think it was Mark that said something like this. And that like the people playing the war games were much less laser focused on a specific game, right? Maybe, yeah. I mean, I think any RPG can fundamentally qualify. Maybe not Vampire, but I think most. Let me put it this way: I think most RPG sessions, regardless of the game in question, probably are Beer and Pretzels compatible. Let me put it that way, bearing in mind that the vast majority of RPG sessions are in fact D&D sessions, where some goofy shit tends to happen. So, because that's the way the game's designed. Yeah, Neil Bedke mentions Melee and Wizard again, which I can totally see, but remember, Melee and Wizard aren't really a full RPG. They are really war games, actually. They are tactical hex-based combat games. When you get into the Labyrinth, where it becomes an actual RPG, then that's a bit different, but that's also a little more involved. Although the Fantasy Trip in general is pretty rules light. Derps, Beer and Pretzels. There we go. I don't remember them doing that book. Paranoia. Woo! I could totally see this working. I haven't played Paranoia enough to really comment on playing it intoxicated, but and I guess that's not really what Beer and Pretzels means. That by 2 hours into the game, everyone participating is entirely in the bag. That's not necessarily what I meant, but I recognize the possibility of that occurring. So. Unless you're, no. We had frequent hilarity in Rollmaster, and I am including in the hilarity all the random decapitations and flying libs and arterial spray that resulted from the infamous critical hit tables too. I could totally see. Jeff Beeler mentions Classic Traveler. I could totally see that too. I'm going to shoot to do the Classic Traveler one-shot in about 2 weeks, by the way. We'll talk more about it next week. And speaking of the Noble Knight campaign, I don't have a new update today. We are still at 61%, but I expect to have another update sometime in the next couple of weeks. So I think the next update might hit the goal, and then we can talk about the next campaign, which will be exciting. Will GM for Food says that if it lasts longer than 2 hours, it's not Beer and Pretzels. I mean, I suppose if the participants at the table are all in agreement that they are in fact playing a Beer and Pretzels game, then I think that any proclamations we might make might be irrelevant, because part of what comes with that territory is sort of that casual approach to the game. And if everybody is approaching, even if it is Case Blue, if everybody is approaching it that way, then I guess it's a Beer and Pretzels game. Which feels weird, but there you go. So. You're going to make me talk about this, aren't you? I was in the SCA for a while, and did the fighting, and I can't think of a fucking dumber thing to do than consume alcoholic beverages and go out and fight in what is probably 80 plus degree heat while wearing probably 30 plus pounds of shit, and exerting yourself in that high heat and humidity. That's a great way to pass out, and end up waking up in an ambulance 25 minutes later. That's a bad idea. The problem there is that alcohol dehydrates you, and that will cause huge problems if you are like doing heavy exertion out in the heat too. So now after the battle, that is a different story entirely. After the battle comes the shower, and then after the shower, then it is time for alcoholic beverages. This is a good point. I think the GEV is just kind of it's just kind of lumped in with Ogre because it is sort of a related game. I think that it just kind of people consider it just kind of a different form of Ogre. It's kind of in this sense it may be the Scotch tape or Kleenex of wargames. Fury of Dracula. I do remember Fury of Dracula. I've never played it. I've heard it's actually quite cool. This was an old board game that was released by Games Workshop. I'm not positive they were the original publisher. Maybe they weren't, but I remember a Games Workshop edition from the 80s or 90s or something like that. Neil Badke, could we say that all the SPI quads were beer and pretzels? The only one, this might sound weird too. The one that I would, so I have not personally owned or played or looked at all of the SPI quads, to make that clear. But I have owned or played several, and it feels to me like the most complicated one is actually Napoleon's Last Battles, which is not to say that it's hugely complicated. I just think it's a little more complicated than the other quad games that I can think of off the top of my head. I might be full of shit too. And I might be conflating with Library of Napoleonic Battles because I've played that a lot more recently. So that's possible. Stratego, yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know that it's possible to play Stratego in a non-beer and pretzels compatible way. Let me put it that way. In general, well, so one caveat here, though, is one thing that we do have to count as a quad, even though a lot of times it gets missed, is Art of Siege. And I'm a little less confident that is rules light, low density. Let me put it that way. Yeah, the Columbia block games generally, I think some of them don't work well for this, like Eurofront, for example, but it's just kind of a little big. But most of the rest of them, yeah, totally possible. I anticipate having a great time with Alliance at Origins, by the way, so... All right, so Mike Reed, I imagine this is not true, but I'm not sure what the prevalence of this particular terminology was at the time. I'm reasonably confident that it was around in the 70s. People were using this kind of lingo in the 70s. Mike Reed says that he doesn't think that the SPI folks intended for the vast majority of their quads to be categorized as beer and pretzels, but Wargame Evolution has possibly put them back in there. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I do also think that from this standpoint, many of the Avalon Hill games that maybe people were thinking that nowadays look like beer and pretzels games were kind of more involved by the standards of when they were released. So, John C. from the sunny Philippines. How about that? There you go. So yeah, there's a new edition of this out now. This is the first block war game. It's a very important game to the history of war games. I have a video on it, so check that out if you're interested. One-page bulge. Steve Jackson's one-page bulge, which is also coming back in a new edition, by the way. We talked to Dana Lombardi about that. Oh, wow. We're both old, Drew, I'm afraid. I can believe this, too. So this is the tactical game from Flying Pig. Am I getting this one right? 85 Afghanistan? That's what I think. We are caught up on the chat now, by the way. So we love John C, and we will forgive him in time. So do I have something on the way? Not really, just swords and bayonets, and some stuff from Chaosium that the post office appears to be dicking around with. So I did a little bit of the anticipated Origins shopping I'm still working out of that budget, but I did a little bit of the Origins shopping in advance so that I didn't have to bother with it at Origins, and that was pretty much Chaosium. So I probably will still buy a couple things from them at Origins, but it's nice when I can look at the computer while on their website and ordering, and then look over at the shelf and see what I actually have, as opposed to other situations where I have mistakenly purchased it twice. That has occurred. I think the Traveler Explorers Edition. Yeah, the Explorers Edition. I actually accidentally bought it twice, but I gave the other one away. So I did order and have received the ASL Starter Kit magazine. It looks very good. It's pricey for a magazine, but it's a magazine and a substantial starter kit supplement too, with I think 8 or 10 scenarios. So I think that makes it worth it. Yep, we've talked about this as well. The quads were also intended to be like a place where there would be like an established rule set that they could give to like a new designer and not have them have to come up with the entire system whole cloth. So this makes a ton of sense. Brian Salahor mentions Wings of War, Wings of Glory, which has been mentioned already. I haven't played either of these, but I actually wouldn't mind trying them. It's just a question of time and opportunity, right? And I tend thank you, Patrick. That is much appreciated. This is just one of those things that where I am likely to play a game like this is at a convention, because this isn't something I will buy on my own, not having played it. But I would try it at a convention, and then maybe I'd like it enough to buy it. Who knows? But my origins are so tied up, and that's the convention this is most likely to happen at. Every convention I go to, I'm so tied down like with stuff that I just haven't had any opportunity to do anything remotely like that. So, the Eurofront system. So it's East Front, Med Front, and East Front, West Front, and Eurofront in the current edition. And I think one or more of those products is currently unavailable due to a component issue, possibly all of them. It's like some of the counters, it does come with counters as well as blocks. And I think they had a bad batch of counters or something like that and are waiting on replacements. So they ought to be back. And Columbia's generally been fairly good about keeping stuff in print too. Not that they necessarily have an enormous quantity of standalone games, but because they're not the most prolific publisher around. But the stuff that they do is considered high quality by a lot of folks, including me especially. I will admit that I have a lot more experience with their RPG end of things than their Wargaming end of things, but I have played a couple of the block games. So, you cannot do this, John C. Definitely not. A couple years ago, some people had the Eurofront down on a table, the whole thing on the vinyl. I don't know what the map is made of, but it's a huge fabric map, and it's pretty impressive. So, and the fabric maps that they do have generally been impressive. I think there's a Harn fabric map too, which I'd love to have, but it is fairly expensive. They are fairly expensive. So. At some point, we will be getting back into the Eurofront scene. I guess I will. Let me put it that way. All right. I think we have accomplished enough clipping for this evening. So, neoprene. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, it's the mouse pad material, which I do like the look and feel of this material. The neoprene, I have the neoprene mat for Europa Universalis, The Price of Power, which I honestly think is almost necessary to play the game, because otherwise the map is so insanely congested. Yes, I have seen so at Winterfest, I set Alliance up on the standard mounted map, and I'm like, okay, this is cool, but it's a little tight. But then somebody else rolled in with the big neoprene mat, and we set theirs up instead. And I'm like, well, this is the way to go with this thing. So these are still floating around. You may be able to get these from Decision still, actually. Stalin's tanks. I think it's the Stalin game you're thinking of. Rommel's War. So there's a game called the thing I think of when I hear Rommel's War is the Rommel's War from Panther Games, which I think was re-released by somebody, L2 perhaps, and then I think there might be a more recent edition. I'm not positive about that. Yes. The pub battle stuff, I wouldn't mind trying the pub battle stuff, to be completely honest. I'm not going to tell you it isn't expensive. It is expensive. And most of the Columbia block games are not really affected hugely by not playing on a giant neoprene mat, but Alliance in particular is. Now, those aren't neoprene. Lorien Empire's maps are not neoprene. I believe they are canvas, and they are very nice. I will say they are very nice. Rommel's Panzers? Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. I have never owned one of the any of the metagaming micro games. Nor am I have owned at least one from Steve Jackson, though. And I believe that was Car Wars. That I had in the little pocket game format. Nowadays, I still have Car Wars. In this edition, which is, just like a little digest size edition. This was like $20 when I bought it, which was quite a while ago. Well, 2015. And this doesn't have the miniatures or anything like that. It's just little cardboard pieces. But to the extent that I enjoyed Car Wars, and I got to play Car Wars with Steve Jackson at one point at a Gen Con in like 91 or 92 or something like that. L2, so my understanding is that L2 is not officially out of business, that they are more or less on some kind of hiatus until they decide to not be anymore. That is basically my understanding. Ooh, Chris George mentions again Fury of Dracula, probably the second secret movement game after Scotland Yard. Like the mechanics a lot, and the OSG wooden sleds. So you can. It turns out, I think you can get the OSG the wooden sleds from Cube for Me too. I believe. I could be wrong about that. Yeah, it was a Gen Con, so he demoed it for a lot of people, but it was freaking awesome. It was. We used Matchbox cars with oversized turning templates, and we were on this like massive auto duel arena that was probably something like 2.5 feet wide by about 4 feet long. It was fucking cool. So it was pretty cool. I do think it was not only possible, but it happened that Car Wars got fairly bloated once you start adding motorcycles. Cool, like buses and semi trucks. Yeah, okay, no problem. When you start getting into the boats and the helicopters and stuff like that, I feel like you're stretching the game system well beyond the boundaries that it was originally designed to accommodate. Cosmic Encounter. Yeah, no kidding. Honestly, Alistair, they may have just like sent them to everybody. I don't know. I have no idea. I do know they're nice. They're very nice. Well, this might Art may have said this, but talking to Art is the only reason I'm saying I'm not sure that they are officially no more, because last I talked to Art, which has been a year or two, I think he still had some stuff that he was like selling out of his garage or something like that. Now, what's left, I have no idea at this point. Maybe it's all gone. I have played Cosmic Encounter, and it's a pretty neat game. I don't think I could have been quite as serious. Back in the day, there were people who were pretty serious about Cosmic Encounter, and I don't think I could have been one of those people, but I did have fun playing it. I do think that it is one of those games that works best the more players you have, up to whatever you can accommodate. I wouldn't probably go more than 8, but I believe 4 is kind of a minimum for a good Cosmic Encounter game. This show, I didn't have anything to do with that. You do not have to pay YouTube any money. I might have to look at that, actually, because that's not supposed to happen on the live shows. Yeah, no kidding. I think there has been talk over the last several years, and I guess by several, I think I mean about 20, of a new version of Streets of Stalingrad, and I just don't have any clear idea of who's working on what exactly. I wouldn't be stunned if it came back, but I'm not positive it will come back. This is possible. Yeah. So one of the inspirations of, you can see Cosmic Encounters influence in the Avalon Hill Dune game too, by the way. One of the like stated influences for Magic the Gathering back in the day was Cosmic Encounter. So, I mean, who doesn't like Nutella? That seems crazy to me, but I also don't want ads in the live shows. So at the beginning, at the end, whatever, I don't care. I don't like mid-roll ads. So I don't have anything from L2, and I don't think I ever have had anything from L2, but I have and still have a couple of games that L2 did as well. Just a Guard pops in to let people know that Beer and Pretzels Wargaming comes from Prussian officer circles. I guess that does make sense. In France, it was known as Vin et Baguette Wargaming. I mean, makes complete sense. We were actually joking about this at the beginning of the show. So, I think there are, I believe, I'd have to look, but I believe there are multiple shared designers between Cosmic Encounters and the Avalon Hill Dune, which is a wonderful game. So, yeah, if you can reach out to Art, he's not that hard to get a hold of. To see if he's got anything. And last I asked, he did still have copies of Streets of Stalingrad. Again, that's been a few years. No, I would look up Art Lupinacci on Facebook. That's how I'd get a hold of Art. I may have his email as well, but if I didn't have his email, and I might not, I would look him up on Facebook. He's on Facebook. I'm pretty sure. We talked about this on the Noble Knight trip a little bit because I picked up a copy of Kings and Things as part of that trip, although I didn't get it from Noble Knight. I think Brant did. King of the Tabletop came out from, I believe, Mayfair originally, and there were multiple editions of it. But an original version of that game, it was published in Dragon Magazine as a game called King of the Tabletop, and it was actually awesome. At least I liked it a lot at the time, and this would have been 83 or 84. You had this like cardboard insert in the magazine, and you had to pull that out and then paste it onto cardboard or something like that. I didn't have cardboard as a kid, so I used self-adhesive linoleum tiles, which I think is something that, Art works with Compass, so he shows up to Compass Expo, and he also shows up at that Niagara Board Gaming Festival or whatever it's called. And Brant clarifies that King of the Tabletop was Dragon Magazine number 77. Yeah, I say this is true. Was that a Tom Wham game? I thought it was. But also, as I recall, the art was done by... Tom Wham was an artist, too. Is an artist. Tom's still with us as far as I'm aware. I believe the art was done by Dave Trampier. I might be wrong about that. I might be conflating it with Titan, which is a very superficially similar game. I would go so far as to say that I think that King of the Tabletop was way ahead of its time, to be completely honest. Every once in a while, Dragon Magazine would include a game. Usually those were instantly forgettable, but King of the Tabletop was actually good. Again, so says the 12-year-old me, or however old I was at the time. Trampier did do Titan. I know that. That's why I have the Avalon Hill Titan still, and not the fancy whoever did it, Valley Games or Phalanx. I think it was Valley Games. Okay, so Meandering Mike says that Tom Wham and Dave Trampier both did art for King of the Tabletop, which I think sounds very plausible. Wham was also the deity of 80s Top 40. That's true. I liked Wham at the time, and I still don't mind a couple of their songs. All right, Perfidious Albion remembers Art, and he set up a playtest for a Berlin ASL scenario. Rate of fire with an 88, wasted a half dozen Soviet tanks. Wow, that's something else. I'm not sure I've I'm not sure I even knew you could get a rate of fire on an 88. To be completely honest. Me too, Todd Cox. I remember this. So there's a whole long story about the ins and outs of management and the people doing the managing at TSR at the time. But for Dragon Magazine 100, it was a big deal. I had the magazine for a long time, and it's one of the ones that went back up to Noble Knight. It's not worth anything particularly, but it was like a double-sized issue, and there was a bunch of special stuff in it, and I believe there was a short story by Gary Gygax and with Gord the Rogue, and there was Gary's Dragon chess variant, which was what Todd Cox is talking about. You had, I would say, somewhere between 3 and 4 times the number of pieces that you have in a normal chess game. And you had like the main board, which was the land, but then you had another board that was underneath that was the underworld. And you had different pieces down there. And each board would have its own pieces. And then above the main world board, there was the aerial plane or airspace or whatever we want to call it. And that had its own things too, that could do things like swoop down and pluck creatures off the middle board, for example. It was neat, and I always wanted to build it too, and it is grossly impractical. Much less so now that we have access to the miracle of 3D printing. I could totally do this with 3D printing. You do kind of want clear material for at least for the air board, and I would want at least a translucent material for the land board too. And the whole thing is kind of big and complicated and unwieldy and be very hard to move. And it did have an embossed cover as well, yeah. There may have been a Fritz Lieber short story in that issue as well, but I might be mixing that up with an older issue too. Okay, the Niagara Board Game Weekend held in Grimsby, Ontario. So, I've never been to that. I've heard it's a very good event. And I heard from Art that it's a very good event. I think Art is one of the people that helps run it. So, this stuff is great. So the interesting thing about Highland Park, the distillery, is it is located in the Orkneys, the island chain. If you know where Scapa Flow is, and every wargamer ought to know where Scapa Flow is, that's the Orkneys. It's one of, I think, only 2 distilleries up there. The other one is being Scapa. And they're unusual in that their whiskey is peated, but it is also sherried. That's not like crazy, but it is a little bit of an unusual combination, at least in the Ohio Scotch market. So I have always liked the stuff. Their regular 12-year stuff is very good as well. The 15 is very good. And because they're in the Orkneys, they like to play up the Viking shtick. Now, look at this. Okay. So, Ed Holtzman, when he lived in Cincinnati, he raided the bins at Ralph Partha to get minis for Dragon Chess. This makes total sense, of course. Ralph Partha, I'm not sure what the exact legal status of Ralph Partha is now, but as at least as a product line, Ralph Partha does still exist. They got picked up by Iron Wind Metals. Iron Wind Metals bought their molds, and I think they are called like Ralph Partha Classic now, which is like a separate line from the Iron Wind Metals thing. But as far as I know, it's the same people. I could be wrong. Now, Brant mentions Emperor's Treasure, which I never touched. File 13, which I did have that issue, but I never tried the game. Snit's Revenge, which I remember, and Gangsters. Was Gangsters in Dragon as well? Because I don't remember that issue. Kind of. Yeah, as a company, Ralph Partha has been toast for a long time. But like I said, Iron Wind Metals bought their molds, so you could still get the vast majority of the old Ralph Partha lines, even where they have sometimes been renamed. I don't know if anybody's picked up the old Grenadier lines or not. The Grenadier had this line of, I want to say by Julie Guthrie, I think, of barbarians that I bought a ton of. And they were, I had like a whole barbarian army that was going to be for, what the fuck is it even called? Bladestorm. I didn't get rid of Bladestorm, did I? No, I did not get rid of Bladestorm. Bladestorm was Iron Crowns was kind of their follow-up to Silent Death, which was a big hit. Bladestorm was their fantasy miniatures game, and it was not nearly as big a hit. And Awful Green Things from Outer Space. That's a good point. So, Partha did in fact make Battletech minis at one point. I remember this. Rapham is still around too, somehow. Stacking Limit says Grenadier is owned by Mirliton SG in Italy and distributed in the US by Badger Games, neither of whom I have ever heard of. Badger Games does have a website. However, wow, okay. Interesting. And apparently they're doing stuff for Goodman Games as well. I'll have to look at this at a later time. Oh, well, maybe not officially affiliated with Goodman Games. They sell Goodman Games product. What? This is news. I did not know this. Obviously, I missed that Tuesday Newsday. So I thought, well, at least I'm only 2 weeks behind on the news. That's cool. Ooh. I have not had the Angel's Envy Triple Oak, but I have had the regular Angel's Envy, and it's good. It's very good. So I am saddened to hear this, that they managed to hang on for all this time, and they close up in 2025. That seems crazy to me. So now that was Mirliton. Okay. Yeah, no, these look like Grenadier miniatures. I don't know what we have. I would only really buy the Barbarians, to be honest. Those were great miniatures, and frankly, I might have them all. I still have a decent chunk of miniatures. I didn't get the ones that I dumped were the ones I could dump for a bunch of money, so the Games Workshop stuff. And I did even save, somewhere around here, there's a box of painted miniatures that does have those that I kept just because I liked the paint jobs at the time. I wouldn't mind busting those out. I haven't looked at them in at least 10 years, just to see if they still look decent. They probably don't. Well, Charles, they got them at Iron Wind Metals normally shows up at Origins. Also, I am hearing that Mongoose Publishing might be at Origins in 2027. That would be cool. I'm just saying, Brant. Hopefully the whole team can make it out. At least they're talking about it. Like, as Mongoose, not as Studio 2. Because 2077 will be... 2027 will, instead of the Cyberpunk universe, it will be Traveler's 50th anniversary. So they're talking about all kinds of fancy things. Now, we'll see on the Origins thing, but I'm looking forward to seeing what they do for Traveler's 50th anniversary. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. The old archers and stuff. There's a lot of Grenadier miniatures. I mean, Grenadier was around for a long time. I want to say, reasonably positive, that the first miniatures I bought, you should see how badly those got painted. I want to say that the first miniatures I ever acquired were, in fact, Grenadier miniatures. They weren't Rapham. I did have some, and I might still have a few Rapham miniatures. Well, it's a little bit away yet. Usually, Mongoose is there in spirit because Studio 2 is there, and Studio 2 distributes their products, at least in the States. So really anything that is currently available for Traveler will be there, and probably, Brant, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Does it seem to you like, with the possible exception of Savage Worlds, like the biggest amount of cubicle Studio 2's Origins display space is taken up by Traveler. Does that sound right? No, I am under no such misapprehension, Brant. You have no pull at all about who shows up for the exhibit hall. I'm just saying you might be interested to learn that they are talking about coming back. This is something that came out in the Matthew Sprange interview for Mayday. So, Same here. Will GM for food. There is somebody will. I need to check on that. Somebody will mention in the chat that Brent, thanks for stopping by. There is a clone of James Bond which you can find on DriveThruRPG. I forget exactly what it is called. There was another question I wanted to get to. Clearly that was not it. So I need to check on this at Holtzman because I bought this too, and I just filled out the survey like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago or something like that. But I haven't heard anything about it actually on its way. I also bought the Droin coins because I had to have them. Come on, and that was probably going to be the last chance to get them. So they ought to be shipping soonish. Have you had like an actual shipping notification? Because I have not. So as far as anybody actually reprinting the James Bond RPG as such, yeah, licensing is going to kill that. There's no, they'd have to basically go reacquire a new license from whoever the owners are now. I guess it's Amazon. And good luck. But the clone, yeah, okay, that's fine. You can deal with the clone. To Honor Grandfather is a Traveler-themed dice game. If it didn't say Traveler, I would not have bought it. Let me put it that way. The coins are, as far as I know, there's a game you can play with them, but they're basically like trinkets. And again, if there was no Traveler connection, I would not have purchased them. But there is, so I did. There you go. 2 years away. The night before it prepared. No kidding. Join my life. How about that? So I agree, though, that James Bond RPG was really good. Are we talking about this one? Hold on, where is it? This thing. We're talking about this thing. This looks like there's a good game in here, but the rule book sucks. And I didn't figure it out. And at some point, I don't have everything for it, but I have a bunch of stuff for it, including some of the playmats. That is not going to go back up there without me standing up. It does look neat. I will agree. Watsy could, but you, I mean, in terms of money, maybe. I mean, they probably could, but I mean, do you think they wouldn't release something that at all resembled the classic 80s James Bond RPG? And it's fun to look at you know what? Hold on a second, because it's actually fun to look at this. Where the hell is it? Here it is. Now, one thing that I will say about the bindings on these were not awesome. So this one is holding together. So I'm going to be very gentle with it. I'm going to read some of the credits. Systems, game design, development, and project coordination. Gerard Christopher Klug, whose name a lot of us will remember. Graphic design by the late, unfortunately, Ted Kohler, who passed away relatively recently. Under advice and game testing, we have Eric Lee Smith listed. Production, we have Charlie Kibler listed, which probably was the Avalon Hill connection, I would think. I thought there was a list of playtesters in this, but I could be wrong. Mark Herman's name's in this somewhere. Let me put it that way. At least in the game. I don't know if it's the main book or not. But this is a marvelous game, actually. I have picked up this boxed version with blown corners from Noble Knight for a pretty good price. Some of the supplements for it are a bit pricey. Squirrel Hermit, thanks for stopping by. But this is a great game. Great game. I think well ahead of its time. The only one of the supplements that I think I would like to have is the Q manual because it's just friggin' cool. The adventures that they did, most of the adventures were based on the movies and or the novels. And they had this really strange format where you'd get like a box bottom and then there's stuff in the box. And it was like one of those half-inch Avalon Hill boxes, but there was only a bottom. There was no lid. It was just all shrink wrapped in there. It was a totally bizarre format. Those have got to be very difficult to find in good shape nowadays. Ooh. Well, look me up in that case. I'd love to play it. So, I'm pretty happy with the shirt, too, by the way. I mean, I'd be happy with this too, but again, the licensing is the intellectual property considerations are going to preclude that. But again, I forget what it's called. I'm pretty sure Brant knows, but he's gone for the evening. Somebody did a clone of the system. It's a neat system, and I see no reason why you couldn't just play the old This is a good point. Wargamers tend, in my experience, to be a lot more comfortable with the idea that, hey, we're going to play this old game from the 70s. Now, some of that's got to be a function of age, too, but it's also just a cultural thing, like a wargamer culture thing, where a wargamer is, hey, this game's been out of print since the 90s, but it's awesome and we're going to play it. No problem. RPG people seem to be weird about, oh, I don't want to play that game. That's out of print. So? What, was it awesome? And then they pushed a button and it went out of print and now it sucks? I mean, if it's a cool game, it's a cool game. Play it. Who cares if it's out of print? If it's out of print, hey, the publisher's not going to publish anything that's going to screw your game up. So we've all seen this on BGG, or this episode on Facebook too, where somebody says, hey, I found these counters. What game are they from? And invariably, within minutes, people will come in and say, oh, yes, that is from such and such and such unit from Fortress Europa. I usually can't do that, but sometimes I can. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what this turns into. I don't think that everything that Amazon has ever made has been, like, video-wise, has been trash. That's not true. The Rings of Power. that's all. Yeah, I totally understand this. So, what would be a good example? Well, here's a good example that is at hand at the moment. Let's say I got a bee in my bonnet to do Twilight 2000. This is fantastically unlikely. But let's say I decided I wanted to run Twilight 2000. Would I run the old one, or would I run the new one from Free League? Honestly, I'd probably run the old one. Probably using the very nice components that Free League has in their version. Their components are really nice. Their mechanical approach is not one that I particularly favor. That uses the Year Zero engine, which is an engine that I do not like. There are a lot of good features of their version of Twilight 2000, don't get me wrong, but I'm not crazy about that. Other games that we're talking about drastically completely different games, right? Other than the basic thematic. So Mo from Mo's Game Table. Mo, thanks for stopping by. We're talking completely different game systems, and some modifications were made to the setting as well. One of which is just that they added like this secondary in Sweden because they're a Swedish publisher, and I guess that was just something that they felt they had to do. But also they made some changes to the old setting, which was Poland, and I think they screwed that up too. So I watched a couple of the Jack Ryan things, and I thought it was pretty good. Ooh, Drew figured out that a weird hand-drawn mimeograph map in old Starfleet battle stuff went with the loose copy of TSR Star Empires. Wow. Okay. TSR Star Empires is I think pretty obscure nowadays. I think that's in part because they became just so much better known for a million other things, right? I have everything that Game Designers Workshop produced for 2300 AD. I do not have all of the stuff that Mongoose has done for it, which is weird because it's available right now, and the stuff that GDW did is all stuff I've had for forever. So, Mo, are you referring to Without Remorse, the film? Because I think I've seen that. I haven't read the book, though. The only two books I've read from Clancy are The Hunt for Red October and Red Storm Rising. Okay, yeah, so, yeah, I wasn't crazy about that. You know, there's really not much wrong with Classic Traveler, right? One could approach Classic Traveler in exactly the same way that these OSR folks, approach like white box D&D or Holmes or whatever it is that they're trying to emulate that day. And they are informed by their subsequent experience with the hobby, right? Somebody coming into white box D&D completely cold back in the day, and only having the written materials, had a hell of a time figuring out what the hell it was. That's probably a little bit true of Traveler too, but the presentation was much clearer. So, in my opinion, but it was a couple years later too. Yes, so Mongoose picked up the full IP rights to Dark Conspiracy, and they expect to be launching a new edition of it. The problem is that this stuff's not in the right order. It's in whatever order it fits on the shelf in. I got Dark Conspiracy too, and I've had this since the 90s. And it's interesting, but I don't feel like there was ever like a good enough central hook to it to like let you to give you a clue as to what the actual gameplay was supposed to be about, right? Now then again, I also never had any of the adventures, and that might have helped. So, my opinion of Mongoose these days is pretty high, and I would like to see what they are going to do with it. Two new RuneQuest starters coming. What do we mean starters? The two things that are coming from Chaosium are actually the two new RuneQuest books that I don't have yet. One of which is Dragon Pass, and the other of which is the new Gods book, Gods of Fire and Sky. I want to say I've seen all of the movies. Well, that's not true. I've seen all the Harrison Ford movies plus Hunt for Red October, and I watched a little bit of that Jack Ryan show on Amazon that I thought was pretty good. It didn't really feel like any of the material that I read, but I mean, a lot of time has passed since then, so. And yeah, I have not seen this one. I was like, no, I'm good. Thank you. Have a nice day. And I don't hate Ben Affleck. I don't need to see that. New RuneQuest starter box sets for RuneQuest. Okay, I haven't heard anything about this. Oh God. Holy shit, is this true? Will GM for food. Likes BRP, especially COC, but the new RuneQuest isn't very friendly for homebrews and ports to other settings. Too much homework. You are absolutely right. If you are going to use BRP, where did I put it? For some fantasy setting other than Glorantha, unless it's something specific where there's like an actual game out for it, Mithras. This is RuneQuest 6. There's no Glorantha in here. It is exactly the same game as RuneQuest. Well, not exactly. They made some very minor changes, most of which are just terminology. Mithras is what to look at. Fairly rules heavy, but so is the new RuneQuest. So that doesn't bother me at all. And this is another one that's not going to go back on the shelf unless I get up and put it away. All right, folks. I believe There are other issues with the new RuneQuest 2, actually, which is one of which is just, I think the book is not well organized. The core rule book, that is. But it's a marvelous game. Anyway, I will look upon, you know what, I'm going to talk to those folks at Chaosium, and I'll ask him, what's this about new RuneQuest starter sets? What the hell? I mean, I could think of cool things that they could do with that. So, Mythros you can get on drive-through and digital or print on demand, I believe. I've got more or less everything for Mythros. But, oh, well, you're fine. I mean, even if you're comfortable with the new RuneQuest, you'll be fine. So, no Traveler Tuesday this week. Although, there is one coming. I wanted to do one. I'm going to wrap the show up here in a second. But I really wanted to do a Traveler thing last week for May Day, and I was just too busy. It was just that way. Thanks to my scheduling, that turned out to be the week that the a bunch of CSR work had to get done too. So, incidentally, the ballot is open. If anybody needs I should probably put it in the chat. Huh? If you haven't voted already, I will give you the link to the 2024 Charles S. Roberts Awards ballot. And I will drop that in the chat, and hopefully it'll fit. It might. So if you have voted already, that won't work. But, and I hope that link works. If it doesn't, email me and I'll give you a link. It's on Facebook too. So, anyway, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out this evening. If you haven't done so already, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel. There's a bunch of ways to support the channel in the video description, including the Noble Knight affiliate link. Noble Knight is our official sponsor here on the Counter Clipping Show, so thank you, Noble Knight. Thank you also to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, without whose help we would not be able to keep doing this. And thanks everyone for the birthday wishes as well. So everybody have a great rest of the night. We'll see you all again soon.